Let's start off by defining some terms that we see or come across in out-of-home care.
Now, wait a minute. Let's define terms here.
We'll start with alleged perpetrator. So that must be the parent or guardian or someone who has supervisory responsibility for the child, someone in the caretaking role. An abused or neglected child is a child whose health or welfare is harmed or threatened with harm. A dependent child is any child other than an abused or neglected child who is under improper care, custody, control, or guardianship that is not due to an intentional act of the parent, guardian, or person exercising custodial control or supervision of the child.
Okay, let me write this down.
So some examples of this would be if someone in the caretaking role had a medical emergency or their health was declining and they couldn't provide proper supervision or care for the child in their home. Another example that we see is sometimes older children or teenagers. They are demonstrating some out of control behavior, not abiding by curfew. The parent doesn't know where they are. They may be having some substance abuse issues, things like that. Those would be labeled a dependency case in out-of-home care. So under Kentucky law, a child can either be dependent or abused or neglected. So the definition of abused or neglected includes circumstances that involve either abuse, neglect, or both. An important nuance here is that commission includes physical, sexual, and physiological abuse. That is something that someone is doing to a child versus a neglect situation, which is omission, which is failure to provide for the child in a physical, emotional, medical, educational sense, or a failure to provide adequate supervision. There's cases here where domestic violence comes into play, where that protective factor is not as it should be. As you guys read in your out-of-home care tip sheet, there is more than one permanency goal for children in out-of-home care.
There's more than one.
There are actually 5 different permanency goals. Those are return to parent, permanent relative placement, adoption, planned permanent living arrangement, and guardianship. More often than not, you will see return to parent as the permanency goal. However, when children have been in care for 6 months, the cabinet assesses the case to determine if concurrent planning is appropriate. If parents aren't making progress on their case plan, the cabinet can plan for 2 goals or pursue 2 goals at the same time. Concurrent planning means that the cabinet may simultaneously plan for return to parent and another permanency goal for the child at the same time if the prognosis for reunification is poor. For a case to be in concurrent planning, one of the goals must be return to parent. The focus is on the biological family and relatives. Adoption is an option, but not the only option, and should not be the primary focus.
So many things can happen in between.
One of the main components in concurrent planning is the ongoing diligent search for relatives. Identifying fathers early is critical, as paternal relatives cannot be assessed for placement until the father is identified. Thorough early searches will likely result in more relative interstate home studies. Identification of fathers and relative searches can take several months to complete. Foster and adoptive parents can help preserve a child's connections and assist in building new connections through visitation and phone contact during this relative search process. It is not entirely uncommon for a child to have been in a foster home for 2, 3, 4 months, and while they are placed there, the cabinet is looking into additional relatives. If a relative is found that's appropriate, after the cabinet does some things to ensure safety, the child may be returned to a relative that wasn't initially on the table at the time of the removal.
What took you so long?
This information on concurrent case planning is given to you for your emotional protection. We want you to know up front that the main goal for all children, unless they fall under one of the exceptions, is going to be return to parent. If a child can be returned to the parent safely, that is what will happen. The second choice will be to find a relative so that they can stay in touch with their birth family on a continual basis. If that is not possible, then adoption by a family outside of their birth family would be the best option. For adoptive parents, be patient. Don't rush the process because it can cause problems in the long run.
Maybe we're being a little hasty.
We're going to spend a few minutes talking about culture and how it impacts foster care. Culture is that complex whole which includes knowledge, belief, art, morals, law, custom, and any other capabilities and habits acquired by man as a member of society. Let's look at some components of culture that we may see in the children that we serve in out-of-home care. Some of those things are food, dress, poverty, family addictions, rural versus urban living. Even think about the differences in living in different areas of our state. Louisville versus some areas in eastern Kentucky, like Pikeville. Completely different cultures, environment, feel. Some other things are religion, work ethic, respect of elders, value of education, habits, language, race, gender, sexual orientation, values, identity, hairstyle.
I'm a Dapper Dan man.
And importance of family. Hitting on one of these things I named in particular, poverty, and considering poverty as an aspect of culture. Poverty is often thought of as a condition or a state in which people live. Poverty can create behaviors that are foreign to foster and adoptive parents. An example of this behavior would be the idea that everything belongs to everyone living in a particular space.
What's mine is yours.
This might mean that hairbrushes, clothing, backpacks, and other items foster and adoptive parents would label as personal items are shared among those living in a particular house or apartment. Children in care come from an impoverished background, and they might not see anything wrong with using anything that anyone else uses. The foster and adoptive parent would express this as he or she may have no boundaries. To further illustrate the impact of poverty, consider bedtime for a child in care. If a child came from an environment where 4 or 5 people slept in the same bed, the child may have the expectation that many people sleep in the same bed in your home. Again, the perception of the foster and adoptive parent is that the child has no boundaries. On the other hand, if a child did not have a bed, he or she may just lay down wherever they are to go to bed, like a couch or the floor, things like that. Ideas, actions, and language, usual and necessary in an impoverished home, will be strange and can be misinterpreted by foster and adoptive parents. Unlike some of the other aspects of culture, which we encourage you to continue for a child in your care, we understand that you will want to help the children express themselves differently and create appropriate boundaries. As you work to change these aspects of a child from an impoverished background, remember that they do what they do and say what they say because it helped them survive in a past environment. You'll need to be patient and kind as you teach the children in your care a different way of living. Culture has a direct effect on our self-concept, which is how we feel about our own identity. One of the roles of foster and adoptive parents is to help children develop positive self-concepts. In other words, to feel loved, capable, worthwhile, and responsible.
This is where you belong.
Another quote by Terry Cross is, "Culture is to people as water is to fish. We all have it, but we may not think of its importance or effects until it's taken away." Maintaining a child's culture helps with all other aspects of their development.